So, adding this to your notes, we're going to have m to the third minus 5m squared minus 11m minus 8 divided by m plus 1. And if we're going to set this up for synthetic division, what do we do? So what number are we using? -1. And then what else should I write down? Yeah.
How did you use -1 again?
So I'm using the opposite sign of the thing that I'm dividing by. Okay. And then what number should I write here? Okay. So I've got 1. And then what do I have? You can work on your notes. Okay. 1, what comes next? Multiply by -1, we have -1. We add those. -6. And we add those. -5. Okay. So the highest exponent we had was m to the third. We divided that by m, so now we have m squared. And that's how I figure out the rest. So m squared, m, no m, and then fraction for this one. So I've got m squared minus 6m minus 5 minus 3 over m plus 1. That is my answer. All right, for this one, we're going to do 3n squared minus 6n squared. Just kidding. 3n to the third. 3n to the third minus 6n squared plus 6 divided by n minus 2. Positive 2. 3, -6, and 6. Is that right? We need a 0. Where does the 0 go? Okay. Okay, so we had an n to the third. We drop it by 1, so n squared, n, no n, and then fraction. So we have 3n squared plus 6 over n minus 2. You drop it by 1. So the original is 3n cubed. So when I divided it by n, it made it 3n squared. Because it's kind of like I had 3n cubed over n, and I could say that 1 on the top canceled out with 1 on the bottom. Okay. All right, now we had the assignment yesterday that I had you guys start in class. It looked like this, right? And I had you guys finish it if you wanted to for extra credit. So if you look at this, I said in the video last night that synthetic division only works when you're dividing it by these simple little linear factors, right? M plus 1, x minus 5, things like that. They had to be simple. So when we look at this sheet, we go, oh, that's why we learned long division, because these problems had to be done with long division. But what I'm going to actually show you is that it is possible to still do this with synthetic division. You just have to divide more than once, okay? So if I wanted to give you a number like, let's say I wanted you to divide 72 by 16, and I didn't give you a calculator. 72 divided by 16 is kind of hard because 72 is a bigger number, 16 is a bigger number. But if you wanted to think of this same problem as 72 divided by 8 times 2, then maybe we could do 72 divided by 8 first. What's 72 divided by 8? 9. So you could do 72 divided by 8 first, and then you could say, okay, that's actually 9 divided by 2. And then you could say 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. So it's the idea of taking the thing that you're dividing by and breaking it into smaller factors. And then instead of dividing it by one number, you divide it by 2 numbers, and it makes the process a little bit easier to do. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a problem where we're going to use synthetic division to divide a problem we thought we couldn't do by synthetic division. So we're looking at number 4 from that worksheet. Number 4 said x to the 4th minus 13x minus 42 divided by x squared minus x minus 6. And this is kind of the idea where this is like saying we're dividing by 16 and we're saying, oh, 16 is too big of a number. So what we're going to do, just like we factored 16 to get 8 and 2, we're going to factor this quadratic. So we're going to look for 2 things that multiply to negative 6 but add to negative 1. And what are the numbers that do that? Multiply to negative 6, add to negative 1 would be negative 3 and positive 2. So what we're going to say is, I can actually break down that denominator into 2 different factors. And now if I look at these 2 factors, now we can see, oh, synthetic division works with those just fine as long as you only do one of them. Does that make sense? All right, so we took 16, we broke it down. Yeah?
You use the quadratic formula?
No.
No, just factor.
Has to be factoring. Right. So let's go ahead and do this problem. We're going to do one at a time. So we're going to do this in 2 steps instead of 1 step. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this one first. I've got 3, and then what should I write?
1 is 0, -13.
Okay, so we've got the x to the 4th, x to the 3rd is a 0, x to the 2nd is a 0, then x, then no x. Okay. So I'll drop down the 1. 1 times 3 is 3. 0 plus 3. 3 times 3 is 9. And 0 plus 9. 9 times 3. And then negative 13 plus 27. I like you writing it down.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. 14 times 3. 42. And then the remainder is 0. What does it mean if you have 0 as a remainder? Yeah, it evenly divides. So if I said 24 divided by 4, or 24 divided by 6, or 24 divided by 2, all of those have a remainder of 0 because those numbers are a factor. That's what it means when you have no remainder. Okay, so that was an x to the 4th. What is this now? Okay, so we got x to the 3rd, x to the 2nd, x, no x, and then no fraction because it was 0. Okay, so this is kind of like, we took this, we figured out how to break it down into 2 smaller pieces, and then we kind of had this middle step where we said, all right, now we've simplified the top a little bit, but we still have to divide by 2 before we can say our answer is 4.5. So what I've got now is x to the third plus 3x squared plus 9x plus 14. I divided by the x minus 3, but I still have to divide by the x plus 2 to finish the problem. So, synthetic division again, we got the negative 2. And then we've got 1, 3, 9, 14. So 1 times negative 2, that gives us 1. 1 times negative 2, again, is negative 2. 7 times negative 2. And our remainder is 0. Okay, that was x to the third. So what do we have now? X to the second. X, no x, and then that would be a fraction, but we don't have one because it was 0. So x squared plus x plus 7. So if you look at the sheet that we did from yesterday, that's the same answer, but done with synthetic division. Yes?
So what if you have, like, how do you use synthetic division to, like, divide by, like, if you already have, like, a fraction in it, like, you divide once and you get a remainder, so then you use that remainder, and you still have to use synthetic division.
You wouldn't.
That wouldn't happen.
You wouldn't do synthetic division. You would have done long division.
Okay.
All right.
Can't you get a factor by doing synthetic? Like, can't you get, like...
Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. It would just, actually, the remainder would then have 2 of the fractions underneath. But for the most part, honestly, it's not going to work. So, if we look at the rest of these, what do you guys notice about the denominators of the rest of these?
They're all factor.
They are not factorable.
Oh, wait.
So x squared minus x plus 3, there's nothing that multiplies to 3 that adds to negative 1. X squared plus 4x minus 2, there's nothing that multiplies to negative 2 that adds to 4. 3x squared minus 2, that factors, but you'd have a square root in there. So when you did this yesterday, it wasn't pointless to do long division. These are the problems that long division is made for. These are the reasons that we have to learn long division, because a lot of problems synthetic division does not work on. And then honestly, with this problem, synthetic division didn't necessarily save us time because we had to factor and then do it twice. So it would have taken, maybe you would have done it a little bit faster, but I'd still say long division. There's a reason I showed it to you first, and that's because it works every single time. Does that make sense? So we don't say, okay, now that I learned synthetic, I just ignore long division forever because I hated it. You don't say that. You still have to remember it because there's a lot of situations where it has to be used. Okay, does that make sense? All right. If you are ever doing synthetic division and something goes wonky, just go back and do long division, basically, because it works every time. Okay, so let's take the worksheet you guys are working on. Let's flip it over to the back side. So if we do this first one, we've got 3, and then what should we write?
0,
Okay. So we've got 1, 3, -1, -3. Okay, so the next question says, is x minus 3 a factor? No, it did not go in evenly. So I'm going to say no, and that's because you have a remainder. Okay, so go ahead and finish this worksheet. On the front side, you are redoing the 4 problems. You've already done them with long division. You are redoing them with synthetic division, and you should get the same answer. If you don't get the same answer, you did something wrong on one of them. Finish the back side, and then when you're done, go ahead and turn it in. If you don't get to finish it today, that's fine. You can turn it in on Tuesday. Okay? So front side, back side, lots of synthetic division. Get it all turned in.